All right, here we go. OverDrive, off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker, and up on TSN 4. Bryan Hayes, the O-Dog Jeff O'Neill, Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star. What a beautiful day. What a beautiful Tuesday. Opening day in baseball.
Wow.
How about that? The Leafs are winning games. The Raptors are losing by 40. Baseball's back. What a scene.
Did you even know that baseball was starting this morning? I was up very early flipping through the channel, and I saw Dodgers-Cubs, and I'm like, I'll check it out. Isn't that like the start of the season?
Yeah, that was a real game. The Dodgers are 1-0. The Dodgers are 1-0.
I had no idea that was going on. I knew they were going over there, but it just creeps up on top of you. It's like start of Major League Baseball. Here we go.
Yeah, it's quick. And Ohtani, you have Yamamoto on the mound, and Dodgers are off to a great start, and the Cubs get dragged over there and they get crushed, and they're probably coming home 0-2. And I found it somewhat humorous. We were talking about it before we came on, Dave. You were referencing at the Tokyo Dome the amount of swag that is over there, right? Like Major League Baseball, they've set up shops, naturally, where they're going to try to sell a lot of different paraphernalia and jerseys and hats and all that. I have to think 90% of it is Dodgers.
Oh, yeah.
Like, are the Cubs...
Yeah, and one guy
And probably one guy in particular, Ohtani in particular, although there are a couple of Japanese players on that team, like beyond Ohtani, who would be very, very popular. But I got to believe Ohtani is taking up 80 to 90% of the Dodgers purchasing. But I need images of the Cubs, like in a locker somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, just way in the back, in the corner, there's a couple of Cubs hats you can buy. Because who's buying the Cubs over there? Nobody.
What about just going over there, period? Like, I understand they always say this is about growing the game, guys, or I don't know. This is basically about Ohtani. But if you're the Cubs and you're the general manager and you get the phone call and it's like, hey, any interest in going over to Japan to get your ass handed to you a couple times and then come back? Like, I would be like, just no thanks, man. Like, the LA Kings, like, there's so much travel in pro sports and it's so difficult. I think they went to Australia last year to play an exhibition game.
Yeah, they did.
What about San Diego? Why do you got to go to Australia?
Right. Get to Quebec City for a game. Go to Saskatchewan
Anything,
somewhere.
Dude. Why? Yeah. What the hell's a game in Australia going to do? You think some kid picked up a road hockey stick and started playing because you had an exhibition game there? Great. I don't know. I just don't see the purpose of it, man.
That one, to me, I had the same viewpoint. Like, I'm sorry, Australia is just not a market that is ever going to pick up on the NHL's program. I don't know what data they possibly had that suggested that was a good idea.
Yeah.
This one is a grand slam. Like, Japan is a massive baseball market. Tokyo's probably the largest baseball market outside of the United States.
For sure.
You know, possibly including Toronto and Canada, for that matter. I mean, Toronto probably would be ahead of it because we have a team and, you know, we're in the same time zone and everything. But Tokyo, it's literally the most populated city in the world. They love baseball. They love Ohtani. And now they love the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And I wonder if somehow we lived in this alternative universe where Ohtani was actually on that plane and came up here, would the Blue Jays be over there right now?
No doubt.
Like, if Ohtani was a Blue Jay, would it be the Jays over there playing whoever they're playing?
Doesn't matter.
The Orioles or something.
Doesn't matter.
And it's 90% Jays swag and 10% Orioles in the back.
Feschuk,
Probably.
how close was that to happening? Ohtani to Jays. Was that even close, or was he just using the
Come on,
Jays?
Fest, tell us.
Tell us something. Like, just make something
you've
up,
known
man.
the whole time.
You know the answer, O-Dog.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
So there was
close.
no chance he was going to be a Blue Jay.
I mean, everybody thought he was going to the Dodgers, and he went to the Dodgers. You know, it was as simple as that. I'm not saying they didn't have East Coast suitors to play off the Dodgers and make sure he got his number, which he did. But yeah, the idea that he was ever coming here, I think, is far-fetched. But hey, he did show up to the spring training facility and toured it, and
loved it by all accounts.
And loved it, absolutely loved.
So what's
it.
the agent's play there? Is the agent's play there? It's like bar play. It's like you got to go buy the Jays a couple stiff gin and tonics, a little smoochy in the corner, and then right at midnight you got to just throw ninja dust at them, and you're out of there. Like
Or you're playing off the Dodgers in the corner is what you're doing.
Doug,
you got your eyes on the Dodgers and you're waiting for them
That's exactly
to come over and buy you a drink is what you're waiting for.
The best the best kind of game plan that I heard that made sense to me and played out in the facts that we know, and I'm sure there are many facts we don't know, was they needed an East Coast option that was not the New York Mets, because if you wanted to go to LA all along, which clearly he did because he grew up with the Angels and going across to the Dodgers was no big deal, but it was going to be a lot of big money. If you had the Mets over on the other side bidding, you knew that Steve Cohen was crazy enough just to say, whatever the Dodgers are giving you, I'll give you $100 million more. And that's essentially why, Steve Cohen currently employs Juan Soto at $765 million over 15 years after Ohtani got $700, some of which was deferred with the Dodgers. But so they had to have a foil on the East Coast, and it couldn't be the Mets, and the Blue Jays came calling.
Well, yeah, when you put it that way, it's interesting that the Mets were never really involved by all accounts.
Well, why is that? Is it because he didn't want to go to the Mets?
He didn't want to go to the Mets.
He wanted to go to the Dodgers. Is what at the forefront of all this. He made up his mind years ago. Likely, I'm playing for the Dodgers, and I need to make this work. And the way you laid it out makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You need someone else. Probably, maybe in a different league. Maybe they're in the American League. Maybe they're on the East Coast. Whatever it is, we need someone else to prop us up so that the Dodgers finally snap out of it and say, "Fine, here's your $700 million."
Yeah.
And I guess in the end, that's what happened.
And the difference there was this guy clearly, it was not all about money for Ohtani. That was the thing. He was afraid the Mets would offer more, and then he'd have to go to the Mets. Because, you can't look a multi-billionaire in the eye and say, I don't want your $800 million or whatever he was going to offer them. Couldn't risk that because he didn't want to go to the Mets. He didn't want to go to the East Coast. He likes the West Coast. It's closer to Japan. It's become home because he was there in Anaheim with the Angels. So it made a lot of sense.
It's worked out for him, I would say, Ohtani, right? MVP in a World Series year one. And who's going to beat this Dodger team? That's the question.
It's scary.
The Cubs are a good team. They're going to be competitive in the NL Central this year, and it's one game. They very well could win Game 2 and come home with a split, but it wouldn't be shocking if they got smoked tomorrow. And I can't imagine the amount of money that Dodgers and Major League Baseball are making over there, all because of Ohtani, on top of the other Japanese pitchers that are now part of that Dodgers uniform. But the Ohtani jerseys and hats and T-shirts and stuff, it must just be off the charts over there. Baseball's back. Again, the Raptors lost by 40 last night. But the Raptors are not where we start today. We start with the Maple Leafs, who needed a game like that last night. They needed a game like that last night, and to their credit, they showed up and performed.
You know what didn't need that? Our buddy Donnie Nichols, Hazy, we have some conversations that are just so crazy about the Leafs, and they're so emotional, high and low. The other day, we were confiding in each other how concerned we were, and this morning, those conversations turned to, if they play like that on a regular... Dude, that's where these...
I know, but...
you watch that game, and it's like... Austin Matthews was so good, and all the role players just kind of fell in line and worked their ass off. They got a contribution from Domi with a goal and an assist, and then the big boy scores 2 goals. It's like, we talked about yesterday, what is their identity? It's like, if that could be their identity, where they worked their ass off, and Claude Noel told me something on the panel once that was great. He's like, if it's just work before skill and you have those level of skilled players, you're going to have a chance to win. Maybe that should just be their identity. Work before skill and you'll always have a chance. But let's be honest, everything fell into place. The power play, the goaltender made some saves. It's like, but you watch that and it's like, man, can it look something close to that on a regular basis?
Well,
because that's their A game. And
yeah.
in the big leagues, you're supposed to bring your A game, 65 games out of 82. The other ones, there's a mixed bag.
And I would say the last time they played their A game was when they were in Calgary, 6 weeks ago or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Everything in between.
Time, man.
It's been a long time. Everything in between, the Seattle game was okay. Vancouver game they lost, but was okay. And everything since the Four Nations has not been anywhere close to good enough. So you're talking Calgary to Calgary in terms of A game to A game. But Matthews scoring twice for the first time in 2 months, multi-goal game for the first time in 2 months, was very necessary. And he led the charge last night. He played really well. Willie scores again. Power play 3 for 3. That is ultimately, when the dust settles, what you're always going to start with if it goes well for them, right? And quite frankly, if it goes poorly for them, that's the identity of the team. That's the structure of the team. Matthews has to be the best goal scorer in the world. Willie has to be in the top 5 or 7, which is what he is, on a separate line. That power play has no excuse not to absolutely cook opponents. And if you do that, everything else can fall in line properly. You can defend pretty well, you can get decent goaltending, and you can do some damage. And, Calgary's been struggling, and Calgary didn't put up much of a fight last night. Like, Dustin Wolf gets pulled from the game. That was his introduction to the Toronto fans. And they just got beat up. Yeah, the Leafs. Yeah. But that's what had to happen because the Leafs had been performing so poorly. Their coach calls them out. Their leadership group calls them out. If they didn't show up last night, it would have been panic-inducing. And they did, to their credit. They had to. And now you turn the page over, and I would argue the best team in the league is in town tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Like this, with all due respect to Winnipeg and Washington, they've been great. This Colorado team is as good of a test as you're going to find in the sport. And they haven't played since the weekend. They flew in today. They're going to be ready for you. You got to do that last night, plus, if you want to beat Colorado tomorrow night.
Step it up, right? Like this Colorado team, man, when you think about what they've done this season, right? Like the way they've revamped their entire roster, basically.
Incredible.
Like there's no, I don't know of an example. I'm sure it's happened many times in the NHL history, but recent history, I can't recall it, to revamp your goaltending way back in December. Then to just they've revamped all 4 centers. I mean, the 3 centers below MacKinnon have been revamped in terms of Coyle, Nelson, and Drury.
Right.
I mean, completely revamped down the middle. Revamped in multiple other places. You trade a star.
Natchez comes in, and Nichushkin comes back.
There's
back. There's another element.
Landeskog may or may not come back after a 3-year
He's on the trip. I think Landeskog's in town.
Yeah. I mean, who knows what he'll be able to bring after 3 years on the shelf and an unprecedented, ligament or a ligament repair surgery. But I don't know, Dog. Like, to me, you call them the best team in the NHL, Hayes. I mean, there's no doubt to me that Nathan MacKinnon is the most terrifying opponent in the NHL at this particular moment in time. And with him, being kind of given those reinforcements throughout the year, it is kind of a scary proposition as the playoffs show up here.
And it's also fascinating that earlier in this season, we talked about revamping their lineup in one of the most shocking transactions in the history of the game in the last 25 years. Their second best player, they just looked at him and said, by the way, you're going out the door and you're going to Carolina. We're doing something different, and that's just what we're doing. And now that we're talking about them, usually you'd be saying, man, they just don't look the same without that Rantanen. Like, what a stupid play. How could they pass up on that guy? Instead, it's like, that's unbelievable general manager work. And I think Kelly McCrimmon did the same thing in Vegas. Like, just win a championship, and then there's some turnover where I guess there's a belief that there's got to be some new blood, something different. Just going at it, and it's even difficult to say it where we live. Going at it with the same group of guys is just not the way to do it. You're going to have some key things for them. It's going to be MacKinnon and Makar and some other guys on that roster, but that's a shocking trade, and I think it's some of the best GM work we've seen in a long time in the league, to be quite honest. Especially the goaltending. Looking at it and assessing it, and not just sitting back like we've seen numerous teams. Carolina, for one, their goaltending. If they think they're winning anything with that goaltending, and I know they've won 6 in a row, they're just not going to do it. But this guy looked at his goaltending out in Colorado and said, I'm not just moving one guy, I'm moving both. And he turned over his goaltending. It's just impressive stuff.
Yeah, well, what it takes is confidence. Like, you have to have, and that is, at the forefront of where we are with the Maple Leaf scenario, and this is the go-to debate, I think, within the fan base right now. And it specifically revolves around Mitch Marner. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter what people think or what their opinions are. It's going to be up to Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment and Mitch Marner if they want to continue their relationship. If Marner wants to stay, it sure sounds like the Leafs are going to work that out. And kumbaya, they'll go on forever, and it'll be Marner and Matthews and Nylander, and they'll finish their careers here, and they'll rewrite the record books, and we'll see if they win in the playoffs. But ultimately, it's not even about how you feel about Mitch. A lot of the reaction to the idea that you have to keep all of them is this terror that no one else can show up to replace them. And what Colorado has proven here is that you can do it. You can actually do it if you have the stomach for it, if you have the courage to go and try it. Now, a lot of things have to fall in your lap, right? You got to make the right trades. You got to bring in the right pieces. You have to have the right assets, right? If you're going to make trades, you got to have your first-round picks and good prospects and all that kind of stuff. You have to have your house in order when it comes to the cap. There's a lot of things that have to be in order, but that's why you have a manager. That's literally why you pay people to manage your team.
And the Bryan, I think it's a big part of why those guys have been people have been so loyal to them. In the past, there was always talk about nobody wants to play in Toronto. And those 4 guys got there, or they signed one in free agency, and they're like, we're not letting go of these guys. No way. Because we finally got some guys that are awesome players that like being here. And screw it, we're not letting go of them. I think that's a massive part of the loyalty that's gone on here.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a part of it, even though I don't know if that was ever actually accurate, that no one wanted to play here. You know, they didn't draft properly. They didn't sign the right guy. They didn't make the right trades. They weren't a very good team. You know, I think that's a part of it. I think there's a fear of, there's this PTSD within the marketplace and fan base that there was a time when it was really dark and it went a decade without them making the playoffs. And no one wants to return there. And again, I don't have an answer on how this is going to play out or what the other options are if you move off a philosophy that has been in place here for 9 years. And we'll see what happens in the playoffs. And if it all pays off, then they're going to be able to put their stake in the ground and puff their chest out and say, we told you. And if they do that, it'll be a standing ovation from everyone. I'll be leading the charge. But Colorado, because we're talking about it, is an example of this, where they said, we're going to flip Rantanen. Then we're going to pick up Brock Nelson. Then we're going to get Coyle. We're going to go out and get Mackenzie Blackwood. Like we're going to have faith in our management to go out and seek who we need to seek out. Washington did it, right? Okay, Backstrom's done. Kuznetsov's done. We got to move off. You got to put the right people in place to draft properly and say, you know what, that Dylan Strome guy's worth a shot. Pierre-Luc Dubois, we all goofed on that play. Yeah. We all said, what a stupid acquisition. Man, he looks good right now.
Yeah.
Right? Jacob Chikrin, Ottawa wants to dump him. We'll sneak in. We'll take him. Right? Like, you got to have management to do it. You got to have the wherewithal to do it, the courage to do it, the smarts to do it. Of course you got to have luck. Of course you got to have luck. But
Pierre-Luc Dubois got to work out. If he falls flat in his face and he's a dog in Washington again, you're like, you morons.
But even they turned over their goaltending too. Like Washington said, 2 guys out. We're bringing in 2 new guys.
Yeah, and it's got to work out for people to look at it and say, man, that guy's a genius. There's a bunch of guys that try stuff and it don't work out, and you're like, that's the dumbest guy in the league.
Yeah,
well, it's got to all work. There's some luck involved for it all to work out.
Of course there is.
And that's why you look at Chris McFarland and Joe Sakic there in that Colorado front office. You got to have some considerably large stones to say Rantanen is a guy, not only a great player, a player you won a Stanley Cup with.
Yeah.
A guy who's been historically great, a historically top 10 playoff points per game guy, and you're saying sayonara to you. We got to go with more of an emphasis on depth, and it gave us more flexibility to bring in that depth. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. And then, by the way, speaking of luck, O-Dog, as luck would have it, it could all look pretty ugly if you meet Dallas in the first round with Rantanen and you lose, and they're on a collision course with Dallas in the first round.
No, they didn't know he was going to be playing in Dallas when they
as it turns
Speaking
out.
about Rantanen, the ballsiest part about it is Nathan MacKinnon runs the show, and he's an intense dude, and I think he's pretty vocal on a lot of things, on the ice anyway, where if things aren't going right, apparently this guy's like, no pop in the dressing room, like all this kind of stuff where it's a maniacal, burning desire to win and be the best. Like, to take that guy off of McKinnon's line, I'm pretty sure they didn't call him and said, are you okay with this? Because the answer would have been, don't even think about it. That's the ballsiest part about it.
That's valid. But also you got to consider who they still had when they moved off Rantanen. And this is where, again, you can use the Maple Leafs as an example. And this was not the intention of the first segment of the show, to have this referendum on the core 4 and where they're going to go.
It always goes there.
But it always kind of gets there, and it's still a big portion of where the Leaf fans are at and where we're going to be going in the next 4 to 5 months. You moved off Rantanen, but you still got MacKinnon and Makar.
Yes.
If Marner leaves, Matthews and Nylander are still here. Those 2 are superstars. And the one guy in particular is your captain, the best player, arguably in the history of the franchise, is still here. That's a big part of it. Like, if you go back 10 years ago where the Leafs were, totally different players, totally different circumstances, but there was more fear in, I think, in a way, in losing Kessel, because Phil was the only guy at that level.
Yeah.
Like, they had nobody else that was as talented as Phil. Nobody else that you could maybe sell some jerseys on. Nobody else that could maybe score 40 goals. And now it's like, pick any of them. It doesn't have to be Mitch. You get Austin, Willie. If one of them leaves, there's still multiple guys here from a marketing standpoint, from a building block standpoint. And the same thing in Colorado. Like Rantanen, as great as Rantanen is, MacKinnon and Makar are better across the board. And if you're an Avalanche fan, you can stomach it because they won a Stanley Cup already, and those two guys aren't going anywhere.
Wow.
So it makes you. It's easier
you're
to sleep at night.
You're a season ticket holder. You're like, every night I go to that rink and MacKinnon's buzzing around, and so is Makar.
Yeah.
After that, you can get rid of basically anyone, and I could care less.
What a feeling that must be.
That's the point about Rantanen. I mean, like, the jury's still out, obviously, but how much they needed Rantanen, how much they're going to miss Rantanen. We'll see in the playoffs for sure. But you look at it right now, like, it's been almost 20 games with Natchez. He's like a point-a-game guy playing on MacKinnon's right wing. I'm not saying they're the same player. They're very different players. But I'm just saying, like, you heard Bednar the other night talking about how he looks at the team logs scoring chances every night, and he looks down there and he's like, seems like every night 50% of the chances are either Nate driving it himself, Nate creating it, or Nate being the secondary creator.
Yeah.
Like, it ain't anybody else. Like, this guy drives everything they do on.
That's the thing, Feschuk. Like, these guys like Rantanen and Marner and leading certain scenario, even Steven Stamkos can be an example. I bet you Steven Stamkos wouldn't mind setting up shop on the power play and working with Kucherov right now, because you realize how special a player that guy is. So if you say you want to test the market or you want to do this or you're going to demand this, like, go and play with a different guy and see what it's like, because those alpha dogs, those big boys, Austin Matthews, Kucherov, Nathan MacKinnon, it's a different beast, man. It's a different beast. And if you want to go fly with somebody else solo out there and see what it's like, go for it, man.
Yeah.
I played with some Hall of Fame centermen, Ron Francis and Matt Sundin. It's a different ball game than Joe Blow. I'm telling you right now.
Well, that is ultimately where Matthews, to circle back to him and how well he played last night, he needs to be like a MacKinnon type, a McDavid type. Now, he doesn't play the same way.
No.
Like, those two guys, they like MacKinnon and McDavid just blow past you. There's nothing you can do in the modern game with clutching and grabbing being what it is.
Different way of dominating.
But he hasn't been able to do it on his own in the playoffs. Like, that's he is a little bit more reliant. He needs to rely on his teammates a little bit more than those other guys do.
Yeah.
Like you just said, what Bednar said about MacKinnon, like, MacKinnon is a one-man show. It helps if he plays with Natchez or he plays with Rantanen and Makar's out there with him. Like, that's going to elevate him to another level. But he's in a position. We talked about this with Sid forever. Like, Sid in his prime, it was like you put two guys on there that just know how to skate up and down the ice.
Kunitz and Dupuis.
Yeah, and all that was that guy is going to drive it himself, get out of his way, and go where you're supposed to go.
Right.
Be smart enough to orbit around him. That's McDavid. That's, I think, Draisaitl. That's MacKinnon. That can be Matthews, but he's got to prove that he can do that in the playoffs. And that's the question, because these other guys, the other wingers and playmakers and guys that are jumping on a train, they're great players, important players. But generally speaking, it is that one or two guys, and generally they're up the middle or a number one defenseman that is going to dictate the way play is going to be played.
Yeah.
And the luxury of an Edmonton or a Colorado is that they got two of them. Like, if MacKinnon and Makar are on the ice at the same time and they play a lot together, it's almost unstoppable. Like, Makar's got 25 goals.
I know.
On the year. Like, he's probably going to win the Norris. He probably deserves to win the Norris. I think it's him, Werenski, or Quinn Hughes.
Dude, look at Draisaitl, who he's been playing with all year.
Yeah, exactly.
He's been going out on the ice with Podkolzin and Arvidsson.
Yeah.
Arvidsson's not a bad little player, but he hasn't exactly been dynamite in Edmonton. And Draisaitl's wheeling around with those two guys, leading the league in goals.
He's going to score his 50th probably tonight.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting
That's a monster.
It's an interesting Hart Trophy debate because, MacKinnon is the reigning Hart Trophy winner and the front runner to win the Art Ross. Draisaitl's right there. He's going to lead the league in goals. And to your point, O-Dog, he hasn't exactly been playing with a murderer's row of wingers. And then obviously Hellebuck's been, to your point, Hayes, I think you've called him the best player, the most important player in the league this year.
Yeah, he has been. I mean, they're going to win the President's Trophy more than likely, and the guy plays basically every night, which I have a great appreciation for. But, like, for me, if it's between Draisaitl and MacKinnon, it's Leon for me. He's got 22 more goals.
Yeah.
Like, that should be a defining element to this. If you're chasing the Hart down, they're both great players. They both have very compelling cases.
Dude, I told same the year that Matthews won. Like
Yes.
that's a significant amount.
That is the most difficult thing to do in the league and the most important thing to do in the league. And the fact that he's doing it with guys that, again, are not at his level. And as much as MacKinnon's having a good year, Makar is doing more to impact his game, the overall team success, than McDavid is in Edmonton this year.
Yeah.
So where are you stacking up Leon Draisaitl with the goaltender and Makar?
I would go Draisaitl 1. I probably would go with what we're seeing right here. These are courtesy of FanDuel. Draisaitl's minus 300, Hellebuck plus 220, MacKinnon plus 800, and then I think it's a big drop off after that. Like, I think those are your three nominees. Those are your top three: Draisaitl, Hellebuck, MacKinnon. I don't think you have to overthink it. Kucherov's been really good. Makar's been really good.
You don't think Hellebuck's going to get, like, I don't know, he's getting a lot of love. A lot of people.
He should.
He
should.
I'm with you, O-Dog. Like those odds are those odds, and they're there for a reason, because clearly there's money being staked here. But I'm with you. Like, when you start really breaking down who's important to their team, if you want to go that most important player as the most valuable or the most indispensable player, the guy you could not live without. I mean, how do you make an argument that the Jets could live without
the
Connor
one
Hellebuck?
thing Draisaitl's got going against him is it's old hat for him. People have seen that out of him. It's not like he just snuck up on the scene and was like, hey, watch this, I'm going to get 50. He's already done it. He's already won a Hart. And I think people they almost get comfortable with it. And they're like, that's what you're supposed to do.
Well, MacKinnon's in the same boat, though. He won it last year.
Yeah, he won it last year.
Like, back-to-back Harts is really tough, man.
That's why I think Hellebuck, and I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, I think he's going to win the Hart Trophy, because they're just going to say their record was overwhelming and his performance was overwhelming, and he's the Hart Trophy winner.
Yeah. Well, when you start looking at some of those advanced goalie metrics, like goal saved above expectation, like, he's just head and shoulders above everybody else. And then my thing with Draisaitl is, and it's not to take away from him, and that you ultimately making these arguments start taking away from people, it's that he's the second line center. It's like, I know McDavid's not having his usual year, but it's still McDavid going out there with the first line, and you get the benefit of being out there with the second line against secondary matchups. I mean, MacKinnon doesn't have that luxury. And the point, I was talking to some people in Colorado this week as, the Avalanche were making their way here. And the point that's been maybe overlooked by the East Coasters like us is, MacKinnon has carried that team in large part during a ton of injuries. Like, Nikushkin's been out, and Lekkonen's been out, and they've had their top six forwards at one point, I think until a couple of weeks ago, had only played a handful of games where they had all six all year. And he is like the undisputed number one center. Now, they brought in the center depth since the deadline, but there's a reason they had to bring in that center depth. Mm-hmm. And he's dragged them to this point where they could add that depth and still be in the playoff race. I think that's been impressive. Yeah,
I mean, listen, again, I think they both have a compelling case. I'm not surprised people in Colorado are going to pump the tires of their guy.
Oh, I know.
Obviously.
Everybody does.
If you called someone in Edmonton, you'd say you wouldn't believe what this guy Draisaitl's doing this year.
Yeah, but they've got McDavid.
I understand that. But again, the counter, Dave, is they have Makar.
Yeah.
Like, Makar, in my opinion, this year has been more impactful on his team's game than Connor McDavid has.
Yeah.
And MacKinnon gets to play with Makar all the time. Draisaitl's out there with Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson. Like,
yeah.
It is a compelling case, both sides. I get it. But I'm not going to downplay the greatness of Draisaitl this year because McDavid's there. I don't think that's fair when you consider MacKinnon was playing with Rantanen in the first 40 games of the year, 45 games of the year. Makar's out there just destroying the league every time he's on the ice. And in what is it, 65, 70% of the shifts they're playing together?
Yeah.
Close to that. Like, MacKinnon and Makar are out there a lot together. So I hear what you're saying, and it is a reality that he's number two. I think it's a good question historically, like where Draisaitl could land in terms of the all-time great second-line centers.
Mm-hmm.
I think Messier has kind of held that title.
You can't even call that guy a second-line
But Messier,
center.
like, my point is Messier was.
Yeah.
Like, Messier was until he got out. Like, when Gretzky left, and that's when he won his Hart trophies. He won it in 90 in Edmonton, and then he won it in 92 or 93, I think it was, in New York.
Right.
And Gretzky had to go. But you look at Messier as a second line center. I think Evgeni Malkin is a guy who has somehow been kind of overshadowed the last 7 or 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not sure, as great as Draisaitl is, Malkin in his prime, he may be better than Draisaitl. He may be better than Draisaitl.
Dude, that's a crazy comment.
I don't think so.
And some of the talk towards McDavid, directed at McDavid this season, I think has been.
You think Evgeni Malkin at 25 was definitively a worse player than Leon Draisaitl at 25? Is that what you're telling me?
I think Draisaitl.
You got to watch yourself, Holmes. I think that is a bold statement.
Well, you listen here, Home Slice. I think if you put a poll up in their prime, who you taking, Leon or Geno Malkin, I think it will be overwhelming Leon Draisaitl.
Okay. All right.
And there's recency bias involved. I just think he's more of a goal-scoring threat, and I don't know.
He is a better goal-scoring threat.
I'll tell you what, if this could be the year where Draisaitl sets himself apart, because right now they both got one Hart, both got one Art Ross.
That's right.
I don't
now,
think
one guy's got a Conn Smythe.
Good point.
And that would be Evgeni Malkin.
That's a big one.
Yeah, he's got a Conn Smythe.
Look at
that.
You just had to pull that out of your back pocket.
Well, I mean, that's just common knowledge. Like, how do you not know that the first cup they won, it was him? I think most people would think it would have been Sid, but it wasn't. You know, he's like, I'm looking at Geno's stats. He's played 177 playoff games, got 180 points, 67 goals. Draisaitl's an all-time great playoff performer.
I know how impressive. I just think if you went to a poll, which Doogie possibly should, who do you want in your prime, Draisaitl or Malkin? I think people would take Draisaitl.
I mean, the other thing, Dog, Malkin might just say, if he happened to be on this call right now, I have 3 Stanley Cup rings.
Yes, he does.
Leon Draisaitl has, to my knowledge, 0.
Thank you for bringing that up, Dave. Yeah, I'm.
I didn't know we were ganging up today.
No, and
let's just arrange something else later on in the show. Maybe me and Fess can go after Hayes.
I don't even know what I believe here. I
didn't even give a definitive answer.
No, neither do I.
We were just talking about the number 2 guys, and I mentioned Messier and Malkin, and I was just saying, and I think this is an example of it that people have forgotten how great that dude was in his prime.
Oh yeah,
like Malkin, there was a lot of injuries and all that, but he had seasons. You look at his numbers. Like this guy, he won a Hart. He scored 50 at one point in his career. You know, in his prime, man, he was a guy that was putting up massive points per game numbers and goals, and he was a beast, and he played with snarl. He's a lot like Draisaitl. It's kind of the original Draisaitl, like played with an edge, big body. How do you move him off? A lot of playoff success. Anyway.
Well,
like the answers today are going to be Draisaitl because Draisaitl's in his prime.
Yeah.
So there's people.
We're going to track the poll all afternoon.
Okay,
Hazy.
who would you take in your prime? Let me throw you another one out. Maybe you guys can Draisaitl in his prime or Mark Messier in his prime.
Whoa. I mean, Messier's resume is pretty damn good.
Okay.
Again,
Mark Messier is regarded as one of the greatest leaders in sports.
That's not. I didn't ask about leadership, but pure performance, A game. 25-year-old Mark Messier, 25-year-old Leon Draisaitl.
I mean, I think Draisaitl's going to have to win something to get in the conversation with these guys, right? Like, it's tough to be in the conversation if you haven't won anything. I mean, you've been to a Game 7 of a final. That's significant, but it's not the real thing.
He's a great playoff performer, man. His points per game in the playoffs are top 5 all time. It's incredible. All right, Confirm or Deny coming up. Mike Johnson will join us. Steve Phillips coming up later this afternoon as well. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. Overdrive continues, powered by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line of the final score. Mike Johnson in about 25 minutes. We got a big one in Montreal tonight. Habs Sens. Wow. That's a big, big game.
Can't wait for that game, and I'll tell you what, there are some old school veterans out there that want you to take back your comments, anything regarding Messier being overtaken. One being our boss. Take it back.
Yeah, listen, I'm just presenting questions. Yeah. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to ask, I think, the pertinent questions society needs to tackle. And that's all I'm doing, because we're talking about, the great number 2 centers, and people are throwing out Peter Forsberg.
Peter Forsberg and Fedorov was a great one, because don't just think that Fedorov was some skilled player that all he did was wheel around. He was a hell of a player. He won the Selke Trophy, man. That guy was so good, it was disgusting.
He was so silky, man. Like, when he started dancing with the puck, it was gross.
Dude, what about playing them in the finals when he got out there with Kozlov and Larionov and the other two on the back end. I skated around in a neutral zone, and I'm like, there's no way in hell we're winning this final. I can't get the puck off these
Crazy
guys.
how good they were. Crazy how good he was, Fedorov. So good. Remember, he was the first guy with the white Nike skates.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, he was like that was a game changer when those skates came out. And they didn't
Do you not
last
remember
long.
that he was almost a Carolina Hurricane? Carolina made a massive offer sheet on Fedorov.
Is that right? I
You don't remember that?
Well, he went to Columbus, didn't he, or Anaheim at the end of his career?
No, this was like prime Fedorov. Peter Carmanos and the Carolina Hurricanes made a huge offer sheet to Sergei Fedorov. I'm like, we're getting Fedorov.
Wow.
And then right at the last minute, the Illich family was like, you guys on drugs, man?
You're not getting this guy.
Fedorov.
Get serious, man. Yeah, because I remember at the end of his career, there they are. Look at those white skates with
Those
the
were
tucks
cool.
out, too, man. Tucks out. You had to be a great player to pull off that look.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Ovechkin and the yellow laces, right? You don't pull out the yellow laces unless you're the best guy out.
You have to be so good, or a tinted visor. You can't be on the fourth line with a tinted visor.
Dude,
You
I
can't
remember
do it.
skating out at Joe Louis Arena, and Anna Kournikova was just standing on Detroit's bench. And I'm like, this guy's big time, man.
Yeah, he's living a life, man.
His girlfriend is Kournikova, and she's a missile from outer space, and she's just standing on the bench down at ice level.
How did Scotty Bowman feel about that?
Dude, I don't think anybody would say anything to Fedorov or Kournikova. It was just like, it was a big league movement. It was a big league maneuver by Fedorov.
I love that move. Yeah, he was so good, man. I played against his brother in Sudbury, who thought he was his brother. Like, played kind of similarly. Was a big guy he had the flow. Like, remember the hair on Fedorov when he first came into?
Legendary flow.
Legendary flow. And
what was his brother's name?
his name? Fedor, I think. It was
That's
Fedor
right.
Fedorov.
Fedor Fedorov.
Yeah, he was a great player. He was a great junior player. Never made it in the NHL, though. To my knowledge, I don't even know if he played a game in the NHL. But Sergei was a different beast, man. He was so good. And there's another guy, exactly. He's behind Steve Yzerman. Your boy Ronnie Francis was behind Mario when they were in Pittsburgh.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You know, like Lemieux and Francis is a 1-2 punch. Good luck with that.
Well, it's
Bowman was
basically
great
a
coach.
luxury. Yeah, you can't put the two label on these guys. It's just a luxury for the organization that
Right.
they had two guys. But you want to talk about Scotty Bowman in Detroit. What about when he said to Fedorov, by the way, you're playing defense now?
I know, that was great. He started playing defense.
Dude, that guy went out there as a D-man.
Crazy.
Yeah, and that kind of led to like a whole new generation of people, like fans yelling and screaming at players that should play defense.
Right.
Right? Like, how often do we hear? Like, we've heard that with Leafs, that like Morgan Riley should play forward.
Yeah.
We've heard it the other way, that Riley should maybe play forward, or would you put Mitch Marner on defense? I don't see how that would work, although he's starting to figure it out to an extent as that power play quarterback. You know, their power play's starting to get it together here. Like, they're 3 for 3 last night, and Max Domi, you know, credit to him. He's had a couple of big moments in the last week. Like, he played really well against Florida. He played really well last night. And you got to figure out where he's going to play, who he's going to play with. But ultimately, if he plays with energy, you'll find a role for him. You know, like that's on the coach to figure out where are these guys going to play. Make sure they show up and perform the way they're capable of performing. I think Bobby McMahon had a good night last night. Make sure, you know, these guys are playing up to their capabilities, and everything will mold together. You'll find a way to make it all work.
To his credit, Hayes, like not producing, kind of some tough nights, still grabbed the guy and beat the living peanuts out of him.
Yeah.
Like, there's something to be said for a guy that's just saying, I'm not going to go through as tough as it was for him. Because he had a tough stretch, let's
Yeah, he
be
did.
honest.
Oh,
and I'm sure he
brutal.
would tell you that. At least they don't. There's other guys in the league that just, I mean, my dad always used to say you got to try to find a way on the score sheet somehow. Like if you're like run somebody over or do something, like try to be a factor somehow. And you got to give him credit because he just tried to work and do something. And now he's producing. And if you remember last year, it wasn't exactly a high-producing offensive juggernaut through the first part of the season. Then the second half, he was on fire. So if he can do that and take it into the playoffs, that's all anybody's asking. I just can't believe watching that game last night how much I was loving it. And I was like, God, is this what this team, like, are these guys this good? This is what they're supposed to be. Like, it looked like goaltending, balanced defense, right-handed shots out there, some physicality, intensity, cycling the puck, creating chances. It was like power play, special teams. I'm like, this is Maple Leaf overload. This can't be true. It was Calgary. They had a tough night, but damn, they were good last night.
Yeah,
man.
it was long overdue. They had to have that type of performance. Now they got to carry it over. But
just don't drop off to a D. That
Exactly.
was A+. That was your A+. Don't go to a D against Colorado.
That's right. Yeah, start elevating. Your new guys are starting to fit in. Brandon Carlos played really well. Like the last few games, he has really settled in, and that's a big acquisition. To your point, you've got Tanev back and healthy now, and I don't know how healthy he is, but he looks like himself. So all of a sudden you have a top 4 here that should work for you. I think that really is what can pop come playoff time. Goaltending, they got to figure that out. Who's going to play? Is it Stolarz or Wall? I still think it's Stolarz. I think he's probably in the lead right now. Deserves to be. Has played very well this year. But that's a position of need. Needless to say, got to have it. But if you have a top 4 defense with size, with mobility, with veteran savvy, with experience, and all 4 guys have it, that can be a really big cheat code. And competitiveness, exactly. That is something that could be different this year from past years that we're probably not pointing to enough because there's been so much focus on the Marner stuff and what's going to happen with Matthews and why isn't he playing better and where do these guys fit and all that. And it's deserved conversation and debate. But you have Chris Tanev and Brandon Carlo here that they were not here last year. Like those are 2 guys who played a lot of playoff games, who are very smart players, who are going to filter in appropriately. Tanev is a top pair guy. Carlo is a second pair guy. Having a top 4, if the goaltending plays well, that's the best way to start. That's the best way to frame, a team in order to have long-standing success in the playoffs.
Those guys were not part of the philosophy in years past.
Yeah, exactly. They haven't been here. Exactly.
It was 5'11" skill guys.
It was give Liljegren a shot, and
Liljegren and TJ
Justin
Brody.
Hall and Brody. Exactly.
It was a different philosophy that had never had a chance to win back there.
Yep.
Especially in a playoff series where it was just.
It wasn't.
I don't know.
No, exactly.
That Tanev alone, guys, like Tanev alone is going to give you a higher percentage chance of winning just from putting him on the ice for 25 minutes.
Wow, we've seen how bad it
Big
gets
time.
when he's not out there, right? They desperately need that guy. Like you talk about most important players. I mean, he's up there on this team's list of most important players.
No question, Dave.
And to your point, Hayes, when you have the top 4 like that, suddenly that puts Ekman Larsson exactly where he should be in the third pairing, where he thrived last year playing for a cup-winning team in Florida. So it slots in correctly. If everybody can stay healthy in that group, it's a really good playoff-worthy group.
Absolutely. Mike Johnson coming up in about 20 minutes. We're still waiting to hear on Max Scherzer. I guess Rob Longley caught up with him. We got an update on his thumb gate, right? What's up with this guy's thumb? We're waiting on Max Scherzer's thumb. That's where things stand right now. And Hector Gomez reporting this week that the Vladdy Guerrero Jr. camp believes the Blue Jays will circle back with maybe some more money before the beginning of the season. We'll touch on that, too.
Why?
Well, because they want to keep him, I guess.
Yeah.
Why not watch him play 20 games?
That's possible. What if you get off to a bad start? What if he gets off to a great start?
Price goes up.
It's a long season, exactly. More on that still to come as well. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Mike Johnson coming up. Confirm or deny around 5:30. We've sent Al's brother out into the city with another pair of Leaf tickets, and you have to guess where he's hiding for your chance to win them. Are you guys ready for the second clue of the week?
Hit me. I know where he is.
Hey, OverDrive fans, happy Tuesday to you. I'm back with another clue to get you one step closer to finding out where is Al's brother and scoring yourself a pair of Leafs and Flyers tickets for March 25th. Here is your Tuesday clue. This place is a favorite for many locals to bring their dogs and let them roam around in the dog bowl. For a guy like me, it's a good spot to grab a charcuterie board and pop up a nice picnic on a Saturday afternoon.
Okay.
Dude, I told you where
Come
he
on,
was.
Al's brother. Like, this guy's taking charcuterie boards on the road now.
Yeah. Can you imagine him taking that into accidentally going into a dog park with the charcuterie board?
God.
Just getting mauled. Hey, where is everybody? And just German shepherds attack Al's brother.
I can't actually see that happening. Unfortunately, I can visualize that pretty clearly.
See it happening.
Yeah, Al's brother with his chicken wings on a charcuterie board.
Yes.
And just pit bulls and German shepherds chasing him.
Nighty-night.
Yeah. Tune in tomorrow for another clue. The first caller through on Friday with the correct location wins a pair of tickets to see the Leafs play the Flyers on March 25th. Find Al's brother, brought to you by McAlpine Ford in Aurora. Our family, the Ford family, and you. Has anyone ever brought a charcuterie board to a picnic? Like to a park? Is that possible? Like, because it's kind of a nuisance to kind of get the board, sorted out appropriately. Like, you could bring the ingredients, I guess, but you're going to bring a board too?
There's all kinds of gadgets. I was at my daughter's hockey game the other day, and a lady in front of me sat down, and she had a bunch of snacks in a tray, and she said, this thing's called a snackle box. And she opened this thing up, and I'm telling you, there was 12 different varieties in the snackle box.
I've heard of those. I don't think I own one of them, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's in my house.
Yeah.
Like what it's like. You going out with kids and like, it's a
yes.
circus. You're going to the rink for a couple hours. You got to bring everything. Okay, snackle box. I got to look into that.
Snackle box.
I need that. Al's brother, do you think he's got a snackle box?
Oh, my God. Under his pillow.
The snack fairy comes at night and leaves him something. All right, hour 2 coming up. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4.